Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hazardous Industries webinar, the second one for 2021. My name is David Evans. I chair the group committee, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us. We're expecting quite a good turnout again today. We had a high number of people registering. So I hope you enjoy our session. Before we jump into it, just want to remind you, as always, to connect with us through the LinkedIn Hazardous Industries group site, which is quite active these days. We've got about 2,000 plus followers, which is great. And we'd love you to keep communicating with us, sending information and participating in the comments area and so on. And also there's the Twitter site to follow with us. And we hope to keep another program of these running throughout the year. Now, today we're very lucky. We've been able to get a presenter from the EPSC, which is the European Process Safety Centre. This is a centre that's been running for a number of years, and I know Tijs will give an introduction to it. It's an industry-funded network, which I've been following for many years because of the quality of information it provides, both in terms of the studies and research it does and everything about it. It's very much an industry, manufacturers, contractors, company organization, unlike obviously IOSH, which is a members group. But I'd like to introduce very briefly Tijs, who's the operations director for the EPSC. I understand he's been there several years at the moment, and his background is in operations. He worked with LyondellBasell in the Moerdijk area, and he is based in the Netherlands. That's really all I want to say at this moment, apart from the fact that his presentation will be available. I know a number of you, when we run these sessions, ask us, are they? They will be available, and we will circulate PDF versions of it. And also he's given permission for us to record the session. So that'll be up on the IOSH website through the YouTube links there. So if any of you want to either come back and check on items or revisit it or recommend it to colleagues to see, please do that. I'll be monitoring the chat and Q&A functions throughout if you want to post any comments. And at the end, we'll put about 10 minutes aside where we'll open up to taking the points that you've put in, and I'll put them to the presenter and we'll run through them. So again, my thanks for joining us. And now it's just up to me to hand over, sit back and enjoy the presentation. Tijs, going to hand over to you, sir.
David, thank you for the kind introduction, and I'm honored to be invited by this team and large audience. Let me try share the screen. And please confirm you can see it.
I can definitely. It's up bright and all over to you, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for your for your introduction. I'm a chemist from background, and I've been raised in large chemical companies, LyondellBasell, but also DuPont and GE Plastics. And for 4 or 5 years, I'm now running the European Process Safety Center. And in this talk, I would like to share a little bit what the center has on information available to you, what we do, and also talk a little bit further on effective learning from incidents that might help you. Let's start a little bit with the background when the center was raised. EPSC, the European Process Safety Center, was founded after the Bhopal incident, and that happened in the 80s. in 84, and a very bad chemical was released, MIC, that a cloud went over the city, which killed overnight like 2,000 people in the city of Bhopal. And that was, of course, very bad for Bhopal. one of the largest disasters that we were having. But it was also bad for the company that experienced this incident, or maybe created this incident and was responsible for it, Union Carbide, because the company could not continue its existence after doing this to society. That company was considered unethical and dead in terms of of existence. And then finally, this incident was also not good for the perception of the chemical industry. The chemical industry was seen as a big hazard to society, and nobody liked that industry. And that's when the industry said we need to work together to better protect society against the hazardous consequences of bad chemicals. And that is the reason why EPSC was developed by big chemical companies that joined together on and working on process safety. So it's a legitimate network. It provides a reason and a good platform to talk to each other legally within the legal boundaries set. And what we do is just talking about industrial best practices. There's nothing like changing perception of the world or influencing legislation. That's not our focus. Our focus is really learning from each other, sharing on things, and developing best practices on how to do things in the best way. And that is a little bit what I like to talk you. So what are the active topics that EPSC has been investigating in recent time? And let us quickly go through a number of these bubbles. One is human performance. And it's maybe strange to say when an incident occurs, it's always when you go back, it's always related to human performance. But sometimes it is a single error of a single person which created the release. And if that's your definition, then we see that about 2/3 of the chemical releases is related to a single operational error from a single person. And that's when we said we need to do a couple of things to make it more difficult for people to make errors, to help people not making the errors. Nobody's making the error on purpose, and people can say, yeah, you need to train them better, but generally that's not the full answer. The full answer can also be put the person in an environment where the opportunity to make errors is less. And we have seen situations where there were in critical situations where there were two big red buttons, and then of course sooner or later you understand somebody is pressing the wrong red button, and something happens which should not be the case. And making that more simple by all kind of things, then we have shared our practices, how you can help your operators, your maintenance people to not make errors. And these go from simple things like how do you close how do you close the bolts on a flange? Flange leakages are very common in the industry, but how you do that in an optimized way, not making errors. Another way is the valve positions. How do you make sure that valves are not ending up in a wrong position? And things can be very simple. On a site, some of the operators said, we have many valves. Some need to be open normally, some need to be normally closed. And he decided, let's give them a color. Let's give the red handles are the valves that are normally closed, and the green handles are the valves that are normally opened. And by doing that, they reduced the errors of wrong valve position and the releases related to that to a very, very low number. They eliminated the errors by 90%. So these kinds of tricks have been discussed and brought together by in this paper. Further, we facilitate a digitalization team, and this is typically where each 6 weeks we talk about webinars. We organize a webinar on a specific digitalization aspect related to process safety. And this can be from drone inspection to automated work permits, and things like that. And then we discuss our experience and talk about the topic. This is SQRA, that stands for Semi-Quantitative Risk Analysis, and has to do with your LOPA performance, layers of protection analysis. Everybody is doing that a little bit in a different way, and we were comparing our LOPA practices among each other. And one very critical question is, of course, how many safety layers do you need to have to protect, for example, a single fatality case? And that depends on your risk matrix. So what we did as well is we did the benchmarking of the risk matrix from the different chemical companies to understand what is the level of risk reduction that is required by your company, and then how is that achieved by doing LOPA. So that was interesting, interesting work. Further, we have an active group on pharma that have been publishing papers on dust and statics recently. Pharma has a little bit its own characteristics and therefore also its own process hazards that need to be controlled, and dust handling is definitely one of those. This is an interesting working group as well that is called CHEF and RAST. CHEF stands for Chemical Engineering Fundamentals, and RAST is the Risk Analysis Screening Tool. These tools and documents have been developed within the Dow organization for about 20 years. And Dow has said we give away this risk analysis screening tool to the industry to start using it. So that was pretty generous from them, and they've been given it to us and CCPS to make it available among large chemical companies to be able to use that and start learning to work with it. So we have an active users group on this, and once a year we also generate trainings for Rust and Chef, jointly with the CCPS organization in the US. We recently started leadership and organization, especially on process safety leadership. Leadership is extremely important to support culture, to support that process safety is done well. And then the question is, how do you create leaders? And how do you make sure that your leaders have the right understanding of things? The industry has done that previously with code of conduct and checklists, but we like to go a little bit deeper here to make really the competency and the true interest, the true passion for process safety into leadership. And the last one here on the list is the process safety fundamentals, and this is our maybe our most recent publication, and I like to talk a little bit further about that, also because this publication has been made available to anybody that likes it. Let me first talk a little bit about the background. Shell had a bad incident in the Netherlands with an explosion in the distillation column. After that incident, they said, how do we improve our process safety excellence? How do we make in our day-to-day operations that we strive to process safety excellence. And what they analyzed is they look to where our incidents coming from, and these come from typical situations that people say, yes, I'm aware this is a high risk and this is a critical thing, and maybe 80% of these the situations came from 20% of the, or 80% of the incidents came from 20% of the typical situations that they were having, and these have been defined and then discussed. So process safety fundamentals are getting well known in the industry as a next tool to strengthen your safety, your technical safety when working with hazardous chemicals. And invite everybody to use these, and I'll show you where you can find them. But if you go to the EPSC website, which is epsc.be, you can straight away find these, and there's a booklet digital available for you to explain this, and even we are now translating them in many languages. Let's see these situations. Let's first take one. These are pictograms that show a little bit what it is about, and just the title and a pictogram give the impression what the process safety is about. And when you see that pictogram, you probably, if you have worked in the industry, can recall an incident and say, hey, yes, this is what we did not good in that case, and we could have solved it easily. If you have hazardous chemicals, then we typically have things like drain valves from pumps and whatever, and tanks. And if that drain valve is closed, then we think the system is closed. But apparently it's not, because if the drain valve leaks, then your complete tank will drain on the floor. And that can be tanks as large as in the Bunchfield incident. And I've been in those situations where we had a 100-ton crude spill just because of the second layer of closure was not there. So we had a maintenance situation, where we removed the flange here, then we closed the valve, but the valve was not really closing because there was still sludge in the valve. And then when we start using the system, we had a leakage of 100-ton crude in a tank farm, which were, and we were very close to our Bunchfield incident, in close to the place where I live in the Netherlands. So what we say, hey, double isolation is an essential thing. Behind a single valve, you need another flange or an end cap conform the pipe specification to close that. And this is a good principle, a good process safety principle to do. And people will probably say, yeah, we know that, and that is the case. But I will tell you, on most of the sites, the large operational sites, if you walk around, you can find situations where this blind flange is missing because of maintenance work, because of all kinds of reasons. And that is exactly what we like to address here. We want to show you the situations that are difficult to handle. So each of these process safety fundamentals has a page where we explain two things. The first thing is, why is this difficult? Why is this difficult to manage in the industry? Why is this going wrong very often? And that's a thing that you need to realize, because many managers say, hey, the rule is we just have 2 layers and don't bother me with it. But if you don't understand why that rule is difficult to follow, why things go wrong in practice, then I'm not sure as a manager that you have any understanding. And then of course you can say, hey, I want no errors. But if you don't understand why it is difficult, that is not a helpful manager. So first, understand why it is difficult. And then the second thing is, of course, what are the good practices to make sure that that you always have this double layer of closure. And that's how we work, and we call that the options to get it right. And that sounds a little bit soft, but that's done on purpose. First of all, it's not a guideline. It's not say dictating this is the way it should be done. But people which struggle with these things need to understand there are a series of options to get things right. And in difficult situations, you want to use these options. So you need to know the options, and probably you want to use them. Now, the process safety fundamentals are on top of the golden rules. And most of the people listening in say, hey, yes, I'm working at a company and we having golden rules for safety. And these things, they vary from buckle up when you're driving. And if you work at height, then you are aligned, so you cannot fall on the ground. And these are simple rules that need to be obeyed. And if you don't follow them, typically you get fired and say you're not a person that needs to work in our industry. But here in process safety, we do that in a different way with these process safety fundamentals. It is, you need to understand the complexity. You don't want to fire people, because if you fire people, you haven't solved anything, because the complex situation is still there. And how do you know that your next person has a better understanding of the complex situation? And so we want to work together with these people working there, and raise their awareness, raise their company competency on these aspects. You see here 18 of very typical situations, and let's review them quickly. First, line break before opening the line. You need to make sure that the pressure and the system is empty. Flexible hoses, there can go many things can go wrong. This is a very specific one, lightening the burners. But if you have a furnace and that need to be ignited, that is the moment that many people have been injured and killed by an explosion. So this is a very hazardous situation. We had a furnace at Exxon here in the Netherlands that exploded in a critical situation. If you have opened an installation, after closing it, you need to validate on leak tightness. Is a very important thing. Loading, unloading is a thing where a lot can go wrong. How do you manage a drain? If you drain water from an oil tank, that's a very specific situation for the oil and gas industry. You drain the water, but if the drain remains open too long, then you start draining the crude into the area where it is not supposed to be. You have a very hazardous situation. Good operating limits. This is about overrides. Very critical how you need to manage that. This is about equipment that is plugged. If you have equipment that is plugged, people get very creative to open and clean that equipment. But generally, this is extremely hazardous, and many things can go wrong. Critical safety equipment, we have something about. Reporting is an important aspect. This is about runaway reactions, recognizing these. This is a very typical thing about splash loading. If you have splash loading with flammable materials that are non-conductive, you have a very critical situation that can result in an explosion very quickly. Line of fire, try not to be in the line of fire. If you remove a manhole, the lid of a manhole, then even if you have a very little pressure over here, that can result in a serious damage to the person, and the person can even die from that. Connecting a utility to a process seems like something that we do on a routine basis, but it is a hazardous situation, because the product from this process can flow back into your utility, and in the end of the day, we can have nitrogen, which contains a lot of burnable gas. This is walk the line. before we start a transfer, for example, from a truck to a tank to load a chemical, then we say walk the line, validate that the transfer is okay, because something can be wrong. And this is never work behind a single valve. So if you have an operation, then don't start to work here. And people say we never do this because we place a blind here. But at the moment you place the blind here, you are working behind a single valve, and that is what you need to realize. And that period is a very critical hazardous operation. So probably many questions about it, but please first get access to the booklet and read it, and feel free to use that as much as you want. We have translated this in most languages. That includes Chinese and Arab. One other thing that the European Process Safety Center offers is we compare process safety performance, and that is important. If you want to make something important, you need to measure it. And this became apparent after the incident at BP Texas City refinery in 2005, when 15 people were killed after a C5 release during the startup of a refinery. And people say, yeah, safety is very important for us. We measure safety, but the only thing they were measuring is occupational safety, which is the lost workday cases and the medical treatment cases. And generally, these lost workday cases and medical treatment cases are personal injuries, something that the person has causing to itself. But when they had the explosion where they killed 15 people, none of these 15 people had something to do with the refinery that was restarting. So you see, you need a different thing. Process safety is a different thing, and needs a different approach, because personal safety is typically on behavior, while avoiding large explosions has to do with technical safety and other kind of with process safety. So we need to measure process safety besides measuring personal safety. And since 2005, since that incident, the industry has developed a new standard to measure process safety, and that is basically there are two standards. The one is the API 754 for oil and gas, and other people using the ICCA standards, and that is what the chemical industry is doing a lot. And what you see is here is the number of process safety incidents per million hours, and now we can compare companies, and companies can benchmark themselves, and we can measure performance from year to year, and see improvements. And that is really helping. We have seen that occupational health, by start measuring it, over 30 years, we have improved it by a factor of 10. So 10 times less injuries by measuring it and focusing it all in over 30 years. And I really hope that that we can do that with process safety as well. You see here the year, and you see the number of companies, and you see the number of hours that has been involved. So so you see we have about on average a billion number of working hours in the chemical industry, with typically 1,000 process safety incidents, which is 1,000 releases that classifies incident. So typically we are in the order of 1 incident per million hours, and that fluctuates a little bit. Luckily, the last year it's a little bit lower. It looks like a 20% improvement, but I'll tell you, there's still quite a bit of variation in there. So here you just see the results. We don't mention the company names that have been participated, but that's what we do for the members. Measuring process safety, making it important. Further, we offer the people we make a conference available on plant and process safety, and that is for the people from hazardous operations to come together and we share practical learnings. That's basically the aim of the conference. We start doing that. The conference is broadly supported by the country associations, and to make it known to in the area. The next event will be on December 7 and 8 this year. We're still planning to go ahead with a face-to-face meeting. We will definitely not make this a webinar format or a virtual conference. And we hope, of course, that the vaccination has gone to a level that we can safely do this again at year end. Feel free to put those dates in the calendar, and it's a 2-day event with great speakers from industry. The rest of the talk I probably want to share on effective learning from incidents, and this is of course something that you might know, where we say, hey, incidents they repeat, and I give you 2 examples here. These are the first layer are incidents related from an oil transfer to a tank. In Buncefield, 2005, and most of you from the UK will remember that day in the beginning of the year very strongly, when you saw on a Sunday, when it was on the news, when you saw the black smoke clouds. But what happened there is there was a transfer to a tank, and the tank was full, that was not notified, and the petrol was flowing over outside of the tank and started to form a gas cloud, and that gas cloud was quite large, and then it was ignited, and then you had the explosion. And then the pressure wave is damaging the other vessels, and you have more leakages, and you get very large fires. So that burned for a couple of days before that fire was under control. And then, having said that, in 3 years later in Jaipur, India, there was another tank farm where the same thing happened. A tank overflowed, and a last gas cloud was formed, and a large explosion with many tanks on fire. And then the year after, in Puerto Rico, we had another similar thing where there was an oil transfer to an oil tank, which was overflowing, and then a large gas cloud was formed that was ignited. Again, an explosion with many tanks on fire. So these pictures look very similar, and probably if I would have switched the pictures, nobody would have realized that. So you see these incidents are quite similar. And then the question, of course, is how do we learn effective from one incident that this doesn't happen at other sites in the future? And this is only this century, but you can imagine that incidents has happened before Buncefield as well. One other chemical which is known to be hazardous is ammonium nitrate. Stored ammonium nitrate can be in very large quantities, and the reason for that is that ammonium nitrate is used as a fertilizer, and that's why it is used in very large quantities, and that the storage is very often very large. And people have the feeling it's just a fertilizer, it's not a hazardous chemical, but that's not true. Ammonium nitrate has a lot of energy stored in it. That's what feeding the plants. That's what giving the crop their nutrition, their energy. But the energy is in the chemical, and if that chemical is released in very quickly in a detonation, then you get an extremely bad incident, and that's what we have seen in Beirut in the beginning of the year. In last year, when we had a huge explosion, and here you see the crater where somewhere over here there was the storage of the ammonium nitrate, about 700 tons. A similar thing happened in Tianjin in just 5 years prior to that, with a massive explosion on a storage facility in a port. And of course, when you see a crater like that, you straight away can say it's the basis is ammonium nitrate, because that's the large quantity that that detonated. Typically, you first have a fire where the ammonium nitrate is melted, and only in the molten form it will detonate. And then even this century in Europe, we had a similar incident in Toulouse, where in the center of Toulouse there was the ammonium nitrate factory, where a detonation occurred, where 2/3 of all the windows in Toulouse broke, and that's not a small city. And you can imagine, after that incident, this factory was not rebuilt in the center of Toulouse. That's just the end of the story. Just 2 cases where we see that that incident report, and the question is, how do you really learn effective from incidents? And that's not an easy question. And I'm not saying I'm having the full answer, but I can at least share what EPSC is offering you. Let me first say a few things. We see some new barriers coming up, and let me mention 2 of the new barriers. The first one is legal. I have to say that after an incident, legal gets involved, and it becomes a legal case, because very often the company is accused of something, and then legal gets in. When legal gets in, nobody is learning. They block the information flow to the legal, and the legal people tell what you can share and what you cannot share, and basically the answer is always the same. You cannot share anything outside the company, because it's a legal case, and we determine how we best solve this case from a legal standpoint with as little as possible penalties. So because the company focus mainly on minimizing penalties, but not maximizing learnings, that really jeopardizes the maximum learnings, and this is something that companies need to realize. And in the old days, large chemical companies had in their top a lot of technical expertise with people that say, hey, their heart was more on the learning, on the technical learning side, and improvements to learn from the incident. But these days we see that more and more people come from the legal and business side, and have less value in sharing technical details that avoid future incidents. Another thing is maybe getting from the public, the public opinion. In case something goes wrong, then the public has a large voice. And that voice is getting more and more critical. They say, hey, they raise their fingers and become talkative. Which generally is more critical approach to companies, and because they become more critical, the company has less tendency to share information with the public, which they will use against them. So that is also a situation which less forgiving is also not helping the learning curve. Just 2 things. I had a third one on managers, but I leave that out for now. So what is EPSC doing? How can we stimulate effective learning? And what we see is that very often, if we don't learn good, then we repeat cases. So we need to do a better job in raising awareness on the typical cases that there are. And we really need to strengthen that awareness. We do that, of course, in a way where we say, hey, we want to learn from an incident, but it should be anonymous. There's no shame, no blame. It's not about how stupid, who was stupid, and who should be fired. And we want to stay far away as possible from that. On the other hand, we like a case where at least we have a photo and we can have a small story on what went wrong. And we have some relevant aspects. Then we discuss the relevant aspects to get it right. And this is, of course, the thing that you then can discuss quite easily in your operation and maybe maintenance teams. It is a single slide, which is very easy, very little text, and very effective to use to start the discussion. And if this discussion is being fed in the right way, then you get the right understanding and you create the right approach at your side to avoid this incident. So we have some learning sheets on typical things that we issue each month. We make 10 of those a year. You can download them easily on this website, epsc.be. There you see the learning sheets. If you click on them, you can see them all, and you can also subscribe to the mailing. That's free available for everybody. And we have now translated them in over a dozen languages. So hopefully, if you have sites in other regions, hopefully we have the right language for you to share that as well. Because the discussion among operating people is more efficient in your own language. I just want to show you a few ones of the learning sheets, how they work. So here you see in a picture straight away what happened. There is a tank, and that tank has seen vacuum. It's not designed for vacuum, and then it's imploding. And people say, hey, you must be very, very stupid to create a tank like that. Well, I would say on most of the big of the senior sites, they have been able to create a tank like that looks like that. In fact, a large chemical company told me once, we have about 10 of these tanks a year within the company. So they say they have a tank that looks like that, and they call it the tank of the month. So this is a thing that happens regularly, and one of the reasons why this happens so fast is this with a very little under pressure you create a tank like that. People say, well, that must be a lot of force, but the pressure is very little. Just with 50 millibars, which you can easily suck with your lungs, you get this implosion. So you can well, just by sucking this vacuum with your lungs, you create a tank to look like that. And then here a couple of aspects are mentioned that we feel are relevant to consider that, which is of course first the realization of the force. The force is large at a small delta P because of the huge surface area. That's the trick that people do not realize. And then the other thing is, you need to have a good vent to the air, and that vent size need to be right. And then there are hundreds of ways to block this. And these blocking ways you need to understand and to eliminate. If a bird is going to nest in here, your tank will look like that. So there are all kinds of things that you need to prevent. Let's do one more, something that is related to COVID. Here we're talking about styrene monomer. Styrene is this molecule. It's called styrene monomer because it can polymerize to polystyrene. Here you have the double bond, which can form a polymerization reaction. In this factory, which was located over here, the factory was shut down because of COVID, because people said, let's stop producing because our people cannot get on site safely. And then they had their styrene monomer in a storage tank. So they had 2 storage tanks over here. And one of the things that can happen with styrene monomer is it can polymerize, and that for sure. And if it polymerizes, it generates heat. And if the heat is generated, then of course the temperature goes up, which generally increases the polymerization rate. And that means that you have a slow but steady runaway reaction. So the temperature is getting higher and higher here. And that is the problem. And then what is happening here, because of this, the styrene is getting overheated, and the styrene is evaporated, and it evaporates from your tank. It's a large molecule, it's a heavy molecule, so the clouds are getting to the ground, and it spreads and it forms a last gas cloud on the ground. And styrene monomer is not only able to polymerize, so it's not only reactive, but it's also bad for health, and it's quite toxic. So that's a direct toxicity, and that's why this cloud went over an area where people were living, and it killed 15 people. There were 12 fatalities, and 1,000 people that were injured here in this residential area. So there are a couple of things on styrene monomer storage that you need to understand. Of course, the lethal doses, as of which concentration is it becoming lethal. Of course, if you build storage tanks close to an area, then you need to do your quantitative risk analysis right. But much more on the front side is how do you store this styrene monomer in the right way. And the first thing is, of course, you need to control the temperature. So you need to add cooling. So even if you have a very little reaction, that you can cool it down and don't start a runaway reaction. And that's a very critical interlock. So your cooling is very, very critical, and your temperature measures are very, very critical, which you need to have with a SIL-rated system. Further, you need to understand how is the polymerization going to start. It's very often with oxygen radicals. So the scavengers that eat your oxygen radicals away and stop the polymerization reaction is very critical. So your inhibitor, TBC, that needs to be controlled, and even if it is depleted after a while, you need to add new of your inhibitor, and you need to control that inhibitor concentration very well during the storage time. Oxygen concentration is an important aspect, and well, you see a number of aspects that you really need to discuss intensely around stored chemicals on your site, which can be relevant for you. Maybe a last one. I'll not spend more than a minute to leave time for questions. This year we decided to link our incidents to the process safety fundamentals. So what happened here is an old pipeline was getting reused to transport some naphtha. So the pipeline was drained, and they start pumping the naphtha in, but they forgot to close the blind flange here. So you imagine if you pump naphtha here, it flows out in a large quantity, and naphtha is very flammable, so it started an extremely large fire on site. And here what we said, the process safety fundamentals that are relevant is walk the line. Before you start a transfer, you validate that the system is good. And the other thing is, after you have opened a system, you validate the leak tightness, which is you do a pressure test with, for example, nitrogen. You put some nitrogen pressure in there, you leave it there, and you see that the system is leak tight. And that's a process safety fundamental, which is essential. So with either that or either that, doing a little bit better, we could have solved this situation. Here you see the members that are a member of EPSC. These are chemical companies, or we don't have individuals as members. So it's just a corporate kind of thing. And I like to thank you very much for your attendance and got a little bit understanding of our shared responsibility to protect society. David, thank you.
Thanks, Tijs. Thanks very much for the time, both for the explanation of all the good work that EPSC does and for starting to challenge us to think about how we learn from incidents. And those feedback sheets and those briefing processes are very valuable. And I know there's been a couple of questions about circulating some information on the links to your site where people can download and use these. So many thanks for that. A couple of sort of questions that flow out of the session that you've run. Quite a few I like. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get through all of them, but one of them, if I take you right back to the very beginning, when you were talking a little bit about the work you do on human error, you mentioned 2/3 of chemical releases relating possibly to human error. And Alandro Zapta has come in with a question to say, are you looking at the human error as the main root cause of the accident? Or are you perhaps looking as well in that those figures due to process and design failures? So are you looking at the end action, or do you go back through the history of the event to identify where human error?
Yeah. Thank you. Very interesting question. We started this working group after the major incident that happened with BASF. Somebody was removing a pipeline, and there were five pipelines, and one needed to be removed. And then there was an expansion, and then after the expansion, he put his cutting tool in the wrong pipeline. A little bit C4 came out of that, which is not that bad, but it got fire. But then that C4 flame sprayed on the next pipeline, which was a high pressure ethylene line, 80 bars of ethylene. The fire people came to extinguish the fire, but at that moment, the ethylene pipeline detonated and the pipeline swept away and killed 5 fire people. So on that site with 40,000 people working, had 25 years, they had not seen a single serious incident. And then by let's say, this simple and let's call it human error, somebody putting his cutting tool in the wrong pipeline, this thing happened. Now the key thing is then how are we going to solve this? My first question was also why had all these pipelines the same color? Why did they all look identical? And then we have this guy putting his tool. So the answer is two ways. Yes, we need to help that person not making this error. And I was sure if one of the pipelines had a red color, he would not have made this error. And right now, BASF have made a very strong rule that then on each cutting place, you need to have a red tire and say you can only cut at this location and to help that guy not making that error. The other hand is, of course, the famous words of Trevor Klatz said, it's too easy to blame it on human error. It's like saying a fall is due to gravity. And can we not make better chemical design? So in this case, yes, there are always two ways. So people say if you have a high hazardous pipeline with high pressure polyethylene, then fire is a risk and a detonation is a risk. So you need to better protect that pipeline. And people say, hey, you need to spray with concrete those pipelines to make sure they're better heat resistance. And in case you have a fire, then at least we have 30 minutes for the firefighting people to extinguish the fire without them getting killed. So yes, there are always two ways to go to the next step. It's a technical safety that can give you the answer. On the other hand, getting all pipelines sprayed with the materials is not done tomorrow and probably quite costly. It still is good to help the thinking and see how can we make easy opportunities. How can we just remove the obvious opportunities to make?
I'm sorry, I think we may have for a second. But perhaps I can move on a little bit. There's a number of questions relating back to the the PSF and the fundamentals, in particular the pictograms, which I love. I think they're great. And two that jump, which are really good. Naveed has come in and said, where does the management of change program sit in the EPS pictogram program?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's an outstanding question, and the answer is you have the management system, the process safety management system exists, which has these things like learning from incidents, doing your hazard analysis, mechanical integrity, and that's where the level of management of change is, because it's quite abstract to say if you change something you need to do a risk analysis, and here we have said, let's go one layer deeper. Well, let's go one layer more practical. So the process safety fundamentals are closer to the operation than the process safety management system. Management of change is an obligated thing in each process safety management system that exists, so has been established already, and is therefore not a new thing.
Okay, a similar one which links to it. Now, this is the problem. When you start on a pictogram story, everybody's going to start asking a few questions about, can we have another one? And one of these, which I quite like, is which pictogram or which area do you use for avoiding product mixing and contamination?
We haven't. So these are just 18, and we think so. We have set together with the industry, and we just defined 18. And it might be good that people say, hey, let's come together in a year and include another 10, and maybe contamination is a very good one, which can start runaway reactions, and for quality it's not good either. So we think it's just a set of 18, which hopefully 90% of the incidents, 80%, I'm sure 80% of your incidents can be related to at least one of the 18. But that doesn't mean that the last 20% we should not develop new ones later on.
Okay, that sounds fair. Chris is asking, Chris Blades, how does the EPS activity compare to the way CSB operate and share information in the US?
Yeah, CSB, I say the Chemical Safety Board, huh? Yeah, Chemical Safety Board is located in the US and is investigating incidents that occurred on US ground. And they investigate them very well. And the other good aspect is that they share their learning extremely well, very often in a very nice video. So outstanding program. We do not have a body that well in Europe, and even within the countries, I'm not sure. In the Netherlands, we have a body like the CSB, which is investigating independently serious incidents, and sometimes they make a video, which they did, for example, from the Shell explosion. But the investigation has not the same depth as the CSB. So CSB is doing investigations. The EPSC is not. EPSC is not helping incident investigations. We are just talking over about sharing the learnings. But we're not.
Have you considered across the members having an independent group help on various investigations?
Yeah. We have not gone in that area yet. So great opportunity.
Yeah, it's always very difficult to do that. Anthony Bell's raised a quick question. This may have to be the last, as I keep an eye on the time. And he's asking, what focus does EPS have on operator competence and safe operator instructions? And I do know this is an area you've certainly looked at heavily in the past. So
yeah,
tell us and share.
Yeah. Good topic. I need. I'm only 5 years in the team. I need to look back, David, what we have said, because all our documents that we make are of course listed there. Unfortunately, only on the member page only. But very often, if a specific person is asking, hey, can I have that document, we share it with them. It's not that we ask money for it. It's not that the industry wants to keep it from themselves. but it's I guess a little bit out of respect for the people who paid for it that we have it on the members page only. But if there is a certain report that you're looking for, and when we have it available, then generally we share it.
Oh, that's great. I mean, obviously operator competence is a big area, and there's been quite a lot of work done on it around the world in different I guess, national areas and skills councils and things like this. Is there something in particular you're aware of that EPSC has talked about in that area?
We have not in the last 5 years done a lot on competency, which is of course an extremely important topic. One other thing is we're talking about competencies is very often related to training as well. EPSC has not gone the route like our friends in the US, the front like the CCPS. The CCPS is a little bit larger and offer also training packages, but then they have their business model around those training packages. We are paid by the members, but we will not go the route like getting a commercial thing on training, at least not from an EPSC commercial interest. Maybe there might be things that we like to contribute to strengthen competency at our members and helping to get good trainings.
Okay, well, one last quick one. We're moving away from competence. Lisa Daniel asked, the learning process is good practice, but do you find that leaders tend to follow your good practice, or is there always a tendency to succumb to blaming?
That's an outstanding question.
That's a nice one to end on, isn't it?
Yeah. To be honest, I have to say that the first thing that leaders do is they go to blaming. That's their first direct reaction. If you look to the explosion that happened at the Exxon refinery, which is our last big explosion in the Netherlands. I think leadership said, well, that was a very stupid operator which bypassed an interlock, and that's created the incident. But they would never say, hey, what is our procedure on bypassing incidents? Why was this easy? Why was the culture to bypass that interlock while starting this hazardous thing? And only later on, when they probably get a little bit more relaxed, they understand that it is more a system failure and that they are responsible for getting that system, creating that culture right, and they understand their role. So I really hope that we will never go in blaming individuals, because I've never seen, and I don't believe in that an individual is causing this on purpose. So we really need to stronger focus on helping them and learning how as a team we can avoid that incident.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much for that and for your time today. I really appreciated it. And obviously for the IOSH setup and Ben in the background, keeping everything going. Finally, my thanks to everybody who's joined us and all the questions and things that have come in. I've only been able to touch on them. If you wanted to stay for another hour, there's a wonderful question on black swans and events as such and how we deal with those. We just couldn't get into quite a lot of those. But thank you everybody for joining us. And
thank you, David, for having
you again. And we will follow up with information. I'll bully you to send us the links to some of the material that you've referenced that they can download from your site, and we'll keep you informed on all the feedback that we're getting. Thanks again. Okay, take care everyone. Ben, it's up to you to close it down. I think so.